Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher, and on behalf of the Home Furnishings Association, I want to welcome you to our webinar. And today we're talking about traffic mastery. Did that get your attention? I hope it did. We're talking really more about organic and paid advertising. And we've got a tremendous panel here today that's going to really talk about some key strategies for maximizing your online presence and really talking about tactics and ROI when it comes to organic and paid advertising. Before I introduce the entire panel that we have here today, I just want to mention a couple of things quickly. myhfa.org/webinar. If you go there, you will find everything in our webinar library. This will be added to it before the day is out today. And it gives you a chance to go there and to utilize an incredible amount of information relating to just about anything that you need to really improve your business. So please go there, myhfa.org/webinar, and you can find all of that there. Now, by the way, bottom of the screen, you're going to notice a Q&A tab. If you have a question, please click there. Please enter the question. We will do our best to get to that before we are finished today. And finally, we also want to thank our friends at Synchrony, who they are the thought leadership sponsor of educational efforts like this here at HFA. So without further ado, let me tell you who we have here today. Speaking of Synchrony, let me start with Kevin Hung. He's the Vice President of Paid Media for Synchrony, and his background is really all about strategy and search and social data and technology, et cetera. So he's going to bring some really great concepts and insights to this conversation today. Kevin, glad you're here with us. The next two folks are no strangers to any of you that have been watching a lot of our webinars at HFA or our seminars. We have Carrie Fletcher. She's Director of Marketing for Bears Furniture. She's got over 20 years of marketing experience across the board in a lot of different companies and really brings a lot to the table. Carrie, we just love having you here. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And then Eric Grinley is joining us. He's the CEO and founder of Esquire Advertising. And they are an advertising technology company and really a branding and marketing expert on all levels. So Eric, thank you for being here as well. And then finally, but certainly not least, Shannon Williams joining us. She's our incoming CEO here at HFA, and she's going to be the one who's going to be guiding today's conversation. So enjoy. The clock is ticking. Let's get to it.
Thanks so much, Mark. And before we get started, I do want to thank Mark. This is actually going to be his last webinar with Home Furnishings Association. He's given us 6 years and done incredible things to elevate HFA within the industry, help bringing more impactful resources and education to retailers, service providers, just the entire home furnishings ecosystem. And so, Mark, thank you so much for everything you've done for the Home Furnishings Association in this industry. We are all a better organization and a better industry because of what you've contributed to it.
I appreciate that, Shannon. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody. And have a great webinar. I'll come back at the end and get you guys on task. Okay. My one last.
I don't know what we're going to do without you, Mark. Well, I think this is probably the most timely topic. Every retailer I talk to now says traffic is down. And so what we want to talk about a little bit more today is not just mastery, but there's a lot to dive into around the differences between organic and paid advertising. And so what I'd like to actually start out with, a lot of the people that are listening have a variety of what they're looking for. Are we looking for how to balance and make your dollar stretch? How do we balance the two? And then we have some people attending that say, what do I even do? Where do I get started? So before we even jump in, can we talk a little bit about what organic search is and really how does a retailer use it? Carrie, would you mind jumping into that?
Sure, we can start about organic, and organic is going through a lot of changes right now. I think anybody who uses the internet, which I think everybody in the room does, we definitely see that organic result, which are those results that are not part of the sponsored that's on the top and the sponsored that's at the bottom. It's not part of that. Your organic is just what it sounds like. It's that non-paid center of the page results that you're getting based on what's on your website. So this is something that's generated by Google. When the crawlers come through your website, crawlers are a lot like spiders. They just kind of zip around and try to understand who you are, what you do, and what you're all about based on the content that's in your website. So organic is really important, but it's really something that you generate based on your website content itself. It's not something that you can drive outside of that. You just have to make sure that Google understands you when they come through. So organic is important, but what's interesting right now, and this is what a lot of people are seeing, is that organic is losing its space on your search windows and in your search results because of the amount of Google Shopping is taking up a lot of space near the top. You've got the AI generated content that's coming in now as part of the Google search engine and any search engine. But yeah, organic is changing, and it's important to understand why and what you can do to keep yourself relevant.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. So how does a retailer, in that middle part where nobody's paying and Google's not controlling, how does a retailer end up in that middle section through an organic search?
Be very clear about who you are. Be very clear about what your brand is on your website. Make sure you're using words that really do define who you are. Um, Anytime you're using, we all like to use images, we all like to use pictures and all that type of thing. Guess what? Crawlers aren't really reading that as part of your organic. You need to make sure that you have alt text on your images to describe what they are so that Google can fully understand um, what this is and how it represents your brand. Have that blog content, have content that really speaks to your unique selling propositions, your unique, your branding elements, really. Make sure that all of that is evident and clear throughout your website. Make sure your locations are clear and that your location pages are set up properly so that Google understands where you are and where you're doing business. But everything needs to be in clear text throughout your website. But then also you have to make sure that any old SEO strategies have been removed from your site, because things that used to be relevant SEO strategies even 5, 10 years ago are now read as spam by Google and will actually reduce your ranking. So it's really important that you either have a partner that can help you understand this, or that you subscribe to informational newsletters and whatnot that will keep you up to date on what's happening with Google. Google is not real great at giving you advance notice of what they're about to do, and they're not real great at defining um, how to maximize yourself within their framework as they make changes to the algorithms and whatnot. Right now, for example, they're saying that links are no longer as important as they used to be. Forever, we've been using, hyperlinks, backlinks, all of that to really help add to relevancy for our content. Guess what? Google's been really, really clear over the past couple of weeks now that, yeah, that's not as important as it used to be, and it may not be important at all. So, we've got to keep an eye on that and see what the industry is really, how they're reacting to that. But, just because you have a partner who was good or has done great things for you doesn't mean you shouldn't be questioning them now and saying, how is our strategy aligning with the new Google algorithm? How is this making us look? It's always really important from the customer side of things, meaning we're a customer of this agency, SEO agency or whatever. It's important for us to do our due diligence, understand what's happening, and at least ask the questions so that we can start a conversation and make sure that what we have or what we're being provided is still the best for the result we're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Carrie, I follow a lot of the SEO stuff that, is going on right now. And, like there's been many a times where they've tried to say that like backlinks weren't as important. Do you think that it's like this is another one of those where it's not necessarily about the fact that backlinks are important. It's about the quality of the backlink and them really just trying to get rid of, the spammed links that are out there?
Combination, and that's a really good observation, because I think back in August when they did that major algorithmic change that we all saw a big dip. I think that was step one toward that, when they really made it clear that they were looking for quality.
Yeah.
But I think as we're getting further along and as AI is becoming more and more of a component in the search algorithms themselves, I think Google is less reliant on the triggers that the link would give them, and now they're able to actually understand content in a different light. So I think we're seeing a big shift. And a lot of this is speculative, but a lot of this is also based on what I've heard from Google directly and from other experts. But yeah, I think the link strategy is going to shift dramatically over the next 6 months, and we have to be thinking that way. It's all about quality content. But if I may add to it, if you really think about the internet and what we experience with it, anybody looking to maybe lose some of that COVID weight, you can't do a search to say, how do I lose weight? Without being subject to what I call the garbage heap of the internet. You don't know what's fact, you don't know what's fiction, because we've all spent a lot of time writing content. The content may not be real, it may not be legitimate, it may not be intelligently sourced. It's just content that we did to create keywords to really just make ourselves noticeable. Hi, Google, it's me. This is my keyword. So I think Google's reacting to that and saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to clean this up, because they have driven this in this direction of creating junk content. And they're realizing that it's not a great service for anybody. So I think that that's where this normalization is coming from.
And for the people that don't know, that are out there, they can go into like their Google console basically and look at the links that are linking into them and then disavow those links, right? The ones that are low quality link-ins.
Absolutely. And that's a smart thing to be doing. Lots of tools that can do that. If your web provider can't help you with that, then it's definitely time to look into some tools, some third-party tools. But yeah, I'm a big fan of scraping your site, of running some diagnostics on that, which you should do regularly anyway, because links do disappear on us. You might be linking to external content. Maybe that source no longer exists. These are things that will actually drop your SEO and create some problems for you. So yeah, really great call out, Eric.
Mhm.
You mentioned, Carrie, that SEO is being seen in some cases as spam and can reduce rankings. Can you speak a little bit more about that around quality of content? What makes quality content in an organic search?
So quality content has to be consistent with your brand. I mean, that's probably the number one test to look at for that. So we sell furniture, right? If all of a sudden I've got content about buying the best ladder, it's probably not going to be read as high quality content. It's certainly not going to help me with my SEO for ladders, because Google's not going to all of a sudden, pop us on these searches that have nothing to do with what we do. So that's part of it. If you're going to be writing blogs, you're going to be putting out that content, it should be relevant content, meaning that it's actually got some authoritative tone to it. It's got something other than fluff. It can't be just a bunch of words combining a bunch of links, which, we've all seen those blogs where you're like, wow, it said nothing. It needs to be actual content. And when I talk about how old SEO strategies can be seen as spam, I'll use an example. Back in the day, if anybody's as old as I am and been doing this as long as I have, we used to, in the footer of the website, throw in a bunch of keywords in the same color as the footer of the website. Eric is nodding his head. What a great strategy, right? But yeah, about 20 years ago, this is how you made sure the crawlers understood your site. And nobody saw those words because it was the same color as the footer. So it was completely invisible, but the crawlers would catch it because it was technically still text. So if you still have that on your website, Google hates you and they're going to penalize you for it. And so after that strategy, there was a strategy of keyword blocks, where you would just create a block of content that lived pretty much on every page in most cases. And it was, um, it could be something like, our furniture store carries sofas, love seats, etagères, and you would just list word after word after word, just trying to give yourself some relevance for all these keywords. Well, guess what? Google learned too that that's not quality. And now that's actually read as a spam block. And if you have those on, again, it's going to be dropping your rankings, and you need to be pulling that kind of information off. Instead, if you want to talk about the fact that you have sofas, love seats, armoires, whatever, it needs to be in your content. It needs to be in your product descriptions. It needs to be in places where it actually where it fits, places where it actually makes sense and can inform, whoever is searching. Because the whole point of this is that somebody who's searching to find something should be able to find that on your site, and it should be in a place where they're actually landing where they want to land. Because again, that's part of the quality Google's looking for right now, is not dead ending people, not sending them someplace where they're not finding the information that they assumed they were linking to.
So if you're a retailer and you're doing everything that you're talking about and you're still not showing up on that first page, what do you do?
Phew, well, that's going to need an audit. It used to be there were some mechanisms that you could use to force a crawl of your website. Those mechanisms really aren't working right now. That's not something that Google wants you to be able to do. So when you're crawled is not something that you can trigger like you used to be able to. So I think you've just got to be careful with making too many changes. I think you have to let your changes sit for a minute. There is a lag time. So if you've made these changes recently and you're not seeing a change in your organic, sit for a minute. Wait, watch, give Google that, 30 to 90 days to catch up because it can take that long. Um, you know, just make sure that you're following best practices. I would say probably the number one thing that people miss is alt tagging on their images. So that's what I, mentioned earlier. Google doesn't read the images on a crawl the way it does the content. So you need to make sure that those images have relevant descriptions attached to them. And then, there's all those other just upkeep maintenance things like making sure that uh, your page titling is compliant, that you don't have, especially with GA4 now, that you don't have duplicate page titling, that you've got unique page descriptors, just a lot of things like that. But if you need to, then bring in an SEO expert, and have somebody run an audit on your site. Eric, I'd like to hear what you think of that as well. I bet you've got thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you have to start at square one first. Like if you're not ranking already, and you've had your site up for let's say, a few years at this point, then there's something wrong either with the site mechanically speaking, or you just don't have enough relevancy, in the market. There's a free tool that I use a lot. It's called, it's tools.pingdom.com. And that at least you can put your website domain into it and see if anything's broken on there. Like if you're missing any links, any pages aren't loading, and anybody can just do that to look. And then I would start with like my local Google business page as well, and start there and start making sure I have all of that information filled out correctly. And you really got to start at page one and go from there. And ultimately, I know there's talk again about like that, backlinks are not as important as they used to be. But every time Google's ever made a change, the one thing that's always remained consistent from change to change to change is that those who rank higher have more sites linking into them than not, because that's how they judge whether or not you are more relevant than the person next to you. And so you can search for some, free SEO evaluation, online things that can scan your site, and you can do that for yours and the other competitors in your market, and see like, how many sites do they have, how many links do they have linking into their site versus what I have linking into my site. If I'm on page 12 of Google search, then I have a lot of work to do. If I'm on page one, you should be pretty happy with where you are, but you can do some things to move up. But you got to make sure that everything is relevant across the board. You got to make sure your Facebook page is up to date. You should be subscribing to everything and keeping a consistent naming across everything. Like if my name on Facebook is XYZ Furniture, it should be the same thing on, Instagram as it should be on Pinterest, as it should be on YouTube, as it should be across the board. So that way I can start having all these relevant properties out there, basically saying, hey, this is me. And if you start doing all that, you should start moving in the right direction. And then you got to be doing something to get people to engage a little bit more. I always say that basically like your paid search strategy should supplement your SEO. And the things that you don't rank organically for, the things that you should be paying for. And then what that does is it tells you like, hey, I did my paid search and I saw what my best performing keywords were in my market. And then the ones that were my top performing keywords are the ones that I'm going to start my SEO strategy towards. So over time, what I hope to accomplish is that I spend less on paid and get more for organic, but I use paid to supplement that until I can get the organic working. Because even if you go to an SEO company, a really good SEO strategy is probably going to be somewhere between, 6 months if you're lucky and maybe 18 months if you're unlucky to really get big movement in your ranking. SEO is a long-term strategy. And I would say most of the companies out there that sell SEO services do it incorrectly. So be really picky about who you use for it. Make sure you ask for recommendations from other people that have had success, because you'll hear from plenty of people who have hired SEO companies and had terrible experiences of no success. And that I think is because SEO has always sort of been this sort of like hidden secret magic potion that happens behind the scenes. And so there are a lot of companies out there that could just charge for the magic potion, but never ever anything really accomplishes, and so the other thing is that right now, and every time that Google makes a change in SEO, it actually gives you a great opportunity to leap over people, because a lot of people are not paying attention to the changes. And so if you spend a couple hours just doing some research on what those changes are and start implementing just a few of them, you can make leaps and bounds in your SEO. And there are some people that you can follow on social media that are really good SEO experts that talk about this all the time, that they're constantly out there testing the different strategies. I talk a lot about a guy by the name of, he goes by Grindstone SEO. He's on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. His tag name is Grindstone SEO. I would follow him. He has a newsletter. I've never subscribed to it, but he's a very good SEO person. He is constantly trying the different things and has tons of sites that make a lot of money that are just based on SEO. And so he's got a little bit of insight. And I would just, follow things like that and see what you can implement. You're not gonna be able to do everything. So pick one strategy, one thing to try at a time, and try that and see what happens.
Eric, you
The one
mentioned
thing-
a website.
Go ahead.
Eric, you mentioned a website. Can you repeat that web domain?
Yeah, it's tools.pingdom, so Pingdom, pingdom.com.
Perfect.
And it basically you can set it actually up to like just ping your site like on a daily to like tell you whether or not your site's broken, but it's really great for just a one-off like discovery of like what's going on your site. It'll also tell you like your page load times. One thing that people forget to realize a lot is page load time matters a lot for a lot of different things. It even comes into play in SEO. And there are a lot of furniture retailers out there that have really slow sites. That is something that you can fix, that you have power over and control over, that you can fix tomorrow. And so if you look on that site and your site is loading really, really slowly, and to give you an idea, a site that's fast is loading in under a second. A site that's slow is loading over 3 seconds, right? Like they should be loading quickly.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that something that I take away, and I want to echo between what Eric and Carrie had said, is you need to have both. I mean, organic is critical, but where you are unable to wait for 30 to 90 days as you try to rank out of page 2 or beyond to page 1, paid search is your immediate tool that you can use to rank on page 1. I'm not saying that it's easy, but you can, in many ways, pay your way to the top of those results, which I know are critical for a lot of the folks in this room today, right? So the balance between the two is going to be the tricky thing for each of you, which is to say, how long and how much energy am I putting into this organic search results ranking? And in the meantime, as I watch and monitor and try to work through that magic potion, as Eric eloquently said, I can win in paid because I can pay my way to the first page, which is important, right? Whether, where on the first page is up to you. I mean, dollars and cents count there, but that is the avenue to balance that out as you are playing that long game on organic. You have paid as your other tool in your belt to activate at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, we've talked a little bit about Google and paid ranking on Google. Can we talk a little bit about the paid advertising available on other channels, Pinterest, Facebook, and some of those and how those play into a traffic strategy?
Yeah, there is an unlimited amount of other partners that you can leverage through social or programmatic media, right? I also don't want you to forget about affiliate marketing as well. Those are also out there. If I were to sum, right, I mean, it really depends on your goals. What are you trying to achieve? I gather a lot of folks here are very interested on that lower funnel activity, right? Which is get traffic straight to the site, right? And I want to say that is probably the right thing for the majority of folks here. There are a lot of retailers here. Let's focus on getting effective, low-hanging fruit to the door, right? But I want to make sure that I share one thing, which is at some point you exhaust that, right? As I think Eric and Carrie can attest to, what happens in search is very important in terms of what you can find in terms of how people are searching for you. And those are all these other customers that you're probably not talking to. And that's why you need to fill that funnel and not just focus purely on the bottom. Whether you're working with Pinterest or a programmatic vendor or search as a whole, too much energy at the bottom is eventually going to be a quick race to the bottom. You're gonna empty out the total funnel, and you'll have no more customers. Because at some point you'll see your cost per acquisition or cost per whichever metric or KPI you're using climb, and that's going to climb irrespective of the market, but climbing because you have no longer filled that funnel and activity to be able to capture them at the bottom. And what I mean by that is leveraging things like programmatic and social into at least the middle funnel. What ways are you engaging through display media, video media, and social environments to help continue to make sure that customers know who you are? Search is a very high intent channel. Like I specifically am going to an engine and I'm asking for who is the closest retailer near me, insert product. But in other avenues, you can create a lot of engagement and what's the word I'm looking for? Intrigue and interest through lookalike models, predictive models, right? In-market customers that are not necessarily ready to buy right now. They're looking to buy probably 3 months out, because I think about a lot of the potential brands that are in here and some of the ones that we specifically work here at Synchrony with. And these are not customers that are looking to buy at this exact moment. They're starting to think about things, because usually a big, I'm thinking of a high ticket item like a sofa or a bed or a mattress. That's not something that you typically need right away. You're starting to think about designing a room. You're thinking about, oh, this is kind of getting to a wear and tear. It's very akin to like shopping for a car in many ways, right? Now there's smaller things, but making sure that your business and brand is front and center, so people are reminded of who you are, so that when they go to search, you're the first one that shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's interesting to me, and that I've heard a lot from retailers across the country, we talk about competing with organizations like Amazon, but we know Amazon's not its own retailer. Amazon is a platform, a marketplace for retailers to operate. So when we talk about this concept of driving traffic and using social media platforms and driving engagement, you're starting to see this shift of things like TikTok shop and conversion right there on social media platforms. Is the entire concept of driving traffic, is this the most relevant conversation to have, or do you capture business where business can be found? What's your Eric, what's your position on that?
I mean, I think you have to meet shoppers where they are, there's a reason why they call it a go-to-market strategy, right? It's like what you bring to market. You got to meet your buyers at the market. And so, for a lot of these things, it starts with understanding where your consumer is, and that comes from understanding your own data. So, if you're not tracking your own in-store data, then you're going to be a little bit behind. But like with us, like we do a full data sales analysis for people in order to understand the customer first, so that we can find the place and the people that we need to go after, right? Especially for most furniture stores out there where they don't have an unlimited budget to spend. And especially now in the current economy where furniture and mattress retailers are seeing a decrease in foot traffic across the board. People are being a little bit tighter with the dollars that they want to spend. They need to be really particular about what they go after. So like TikTok, for example, is really great for clicks and to get people to your site, but it doesn't really convert very well yet, or at least nobody has really figured out to get it to convert really well yet. I think like TikTok shop, and if you can get into those and if you can make some money off of it, great. Nobody in the furniture industry has really done it yet. Obviously, like you want to make your products available on all the major platforms. You want to have it on Google Shopping. You want to make sure that you're everywhere where this consumer can find you. But ultimately, most like home furnishings retailers are operating a brick and mortar business, and the best retailers across the country, like at least the best brick and mortar retailers, at best they're doing like 9% of their sales online, right? The average is usually doing somewhere between 3 and 5% online. So they don't necessarily need to focus too much on the e-commerce style customer as much as they need to focus on the customers in market that they can actually get to shop with them. They have to focus on the things that they're good at instead of trying to go into something that they're not necessarily great at. And so I would focus my efforts on basically a mixture of that top of funnel and bottom funnel, and sort of approach it from what's a short-tailed action, right? Like I want them to buy now, and while at the same time having a campaign that's running that's geared towards getting the customer that's 3 to 6 months down the road. And then finding the buying signals along the way that indicate like, hey, I'm going to be in the market soon. If a retailer is looking on, or I'm sorry, if a customer is looking online and they're visiting your site, the majority of the time they're in the research phase. They're trying to find the answer to a question. So, you want to make your site best positioned to help them answer that question. Adding things to your site like a text to chat to get answers to questions can help a little bit. Using services like Podium so that way you can engage with the customer via text message, and have like an AI chatbot set up so that way you can constantly be talking to the customer is gonna help a lot. Because you need to engage and interject yourself into this research phase so that way they don't go on your site, get confused, get overloaded, or not find what they're looking for, and then you lose your opportunity at that customer. So I wouldn't necessarily focus all my dollars in one place, but I would focus on one type of customer more or less.
Carrie, Kevin had mentioned there's no shortage of places that you can advertise your business, and you've been talking about being a huge proponent of organic. How does a retailer find the balance? Where do they put their money? Just if I'm a retailer and I have a limited budget, how do I know the best optimization of my budget and what balance between paid and organic?
Well, and I think that, everybody's making some really good points here. What's interesting about how do you balance, organic is free when it comes down to it. So if you've got a limited budget, obviously organic is something that you really want to be focusing effort on because that's going to pay back some dividends. One of the things that I always look at, and when I talk to my peers and I do some consulting and that type of thing, I always say, look at Google Analytics, look at your acquisitions and look at how they line up. I feel like if your site is healthy, and if your advertising is healthy, organic should be your number one source of traffic. This should be really important because that tells you that everything that you're doing is working to give you some recognition. It's working to give you, visibility where and when you need it. So that's a big test for me, is making sure that organic is in that number one spot. And then from there, yeah, there's a lot to be thought about. And, both Eric and Kevin, you both made the point about, places in the funnel. And that's a really great call out when you're looking at your SEM, when you're looking at any of your other search engine marketing. I think, yes, you have to understand for each strategy, what is the outcome you're looking for? And then if we're looking for a high funnel activity, I look at it with budget, I'm spending less on it. This is going to be, your less expensive clicks. But then I do have strategies that are specifically aimed for that lower funnel. I call them my bottom of the funnel campaigns. And those I'm willing to spend a ton of money on because I've got somebody ready to convert. And I can tell that based on their behaviors. But yeah, both of the gentlemen, you made excellent points about really understanding what it is, where in the funnel these behaviors are. But but going one step further and just adding to that, spend the appropriate amount of money on the outcome you're going to get from that click or from that conversion. Each conversion is not created equal. We really do have to understand the conversions that say, hey, I'm in market now versus, hey, I'm at the beginning of my research phase. So I think that that's a point well made there. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it because it is absolutely true. There is no shortage of places to spend our money. We just have to make sure that we're spending it wisely and maximizing our return where a return is possible, while also not neglecting the building, the building of the interest and the building of the awareness, because that does pay dividends, maybe not today, but it's going to pay dividends in the future. So we've got to keep them engaged.
Yeah. Don't buy the person, don't buy the platform, buy the person. That's, like really one of the things I always preach is, if you're saying like, hey, I'm going to do all my stuff here, like just because I know Google search or I know how to use Facebook's platform, right? That's where I'm comfortable spending my money. That might not actually be where your customer is. And so, you got to buy the customer you want, not the platform that you're used to or that you want.
What I would say is, because there's a lot to consider. I mean, just between the three of us and how much, we're sharing, it's a lot, right? But if I were to just like simplify some of this, start with what are you trying to achieve? That's step one. Outcome, start there. Second, who are you chasing, right? audience. And then from there, as you start to think about your vendors, right, and the vendor selection, think about what's important to you. Can they deliver on at either of those? Starting, is it easy for you to use? 2, is it transparent for you, right? Are you getting the visibility to understand all the different engagements and customer journey points of interest that are valuable to you, and that it's being fed to you in an adequate manner, right? And then 3, pricing, because cost is going to be a part of it, right? Is this a reasonable amount of spend that will deliver back to you, right? Because there is an unlimited. I mean, if I put in Google right now, show me a programmatic vendor, right? Like it would be very large. That's at least 15 pages in Google, right? There's many different options. What's right for you? Do you want to control the levers? Do you want someone else to control the levers? Right? And how much visibility do you want into it? And I also say, if there's a 4th in that summary, is to say that don't forget that all this energy that we're putting in the front of the equation, which is to capture the customer who's thinking about shopping or considering, and then eventually trying to convert. It's really contingent on like what's the rest of that back half, that middle back half experience that we're providing, right? Right now we're very focused on the organic and paid, but like once they get, once we get you to the door, how are you showing them the room, right? Eric talked about page load time. If you got to a front door and it was like really tough to open, would you really want to spend the time to get in there, right? And then what's your customer experience after the fact? Those are all the connective pieces that are super important that I don't want anyone to lose here, because I think that it's the entire experience, right? Because when I think about what Shannon said, is it social commerce or what have you today? It's just meeting them once they're ready, and are you ready to receive them? That's really what I would add to that.
Mm-hmm. I think most people would be shocked to realize how much money they're losing just based on page load time, because the time when someone clicks on an ad for your page to load is enough time for them to go back, right? Like you're not gonna click an ad and then sit there and wait and wait and wait. Sorry, your ad is just not that important, right? Like it can't compete with the distractions of the internet. You're gonna move on to the next thing. So everything needs to happen quick.
Is there something a retailer can do to improve that?
To improve it, yeah. I mean, it all comes down to their website of like, depending on like the size and the compression that you're using on your images in order to get them to load faster. You can use third-party services like Cloudflare and some of these where, you're not actually hosting the image on your site, but you're really hosting it on a CDN and like a link that's loading. And so there's ways to speed it up, but you need a web. You need a web expert to take a look at it. It's not something that like a retailer is going to log in and be able to fix on their own, right? But they can use that tool to figure out how they're loading, right? They can also create specific landing pages for the ads that they use that are more simplified, so that way they don't have as many widgets on their website that need to load. Especially if you have a bunch of APIs running into the site with like all the different manufacturers dumping their product catalogs into your site. And, you have, Google Analytics on there, maybe you have a heat map, you have all these different things, all those things that you add into the site slow the site load time down, right? So building a landing page for your ads before it hits your site makes a lot of sense in most retailer sites.
Kevin, something obviously with you specializing in paid media, I'm going to ask the question. Every single retailer that's sitting behind their computer is thinking right now, are we spending the right amount in the right places? And knowing that we have diverse retailers that are doing business in lots of different ways, how did they approach figuring this out?
Yeah. What I find often? I find often that that retailers are doing a peanut butter spread effect, which is, to tell you what my analogy is you're spreading yourself too thin, right? You have too many vendors and you're doing too many tactics. You have too many strategies, right? And that means you are not actually setting yourself up for success, right? Because you just haven't put enough behind any specific tactics with enough spend and time against it. And therefore you're jumping to the next and jumping to the next and jumping to the next. So I would prioritize, I would shift that mindset to say, when you want to launch with the intent that it will be choppy. period. Because everything tends to be like, there's a learning phase. What I mean by choppy, there's a learning phase, and that you actually need to take the time to absorb that learning period with the best intention. Because if you're a new retailer or new to a specific partner or vendor, it takes time for those algorithms to actually learn how to deliver against your goals. And there are, for transparency, some kind of minimum standards to be able to put out there. You know, putting a few $100s into DV360 probably isn't going to yield you a ton of results back, right? It's just, you can, but it may not be what you expect. And it's because you probably did, you know, 300 here, 300 there, and on all these different vendors. Instead, I would say, and I would recommend, consolidate to a vendor like a DV360 or other, and spend the time, a very focused time and energy, to make sure that how it's delivering what you're learning can actually deliver on the output. So I think I answered your question, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah. So there isn't a magic number. So if actually a lot of people do ask me, like, how much should I spend? I can't tell you because I don't know your goals, right? If I knew your goals, I mean, we're talking about what's your, you know, how much, what's your goal for Los Angeles, California, or Chicago, Illinois, or the entire country? I don't know the goal, so I can't give you a number. There isn't a magic number, but I can tell you that it can get very big very quickly. So I always recommend, like I said at the top of the call, start with a goal and then start to work from there out. But don't spread yourself too thin, because you're just going to not see the results that you were hoping for.
Yeah, you gotta spend money to make money, you know what I mean? And if a business is doing, let's say, you know, $5 million a year in sales, right? They're not going to move the needle on that $5 million in total revenue by spending $500 a month. It's just not going to happen, right? And even if it does happen a little bit, it's not going to be enough that they're going to notice it in the top line and bottom line revenue, right? So they have to be spending to a point where it's going to actually make a difference. And far too often, retailers want to, you know, either test something for a very little bit of an amount of money because they're, you know, afraid to dip their toes in the water or whatever, or, you know, they just don't have the budget there that's necessary. Well, the response that you get from what you spend online is it matters, right? Like, you know, like $1,000 is not going to generate $1 million, right? So like, you know, you have to be understanding of, like, I got to spend more than I spend on Starbucks every month on my advertising campaigns if I'm going to plan to do anything, right? You know, you have to be willing to spend the dollars to make the dollars.
Carrie, can you be the jelly to Kevin's peanut butter when you're making decisions on, does Bears have the right money in the right places? How do you approach that?
It's really a continuous loop, I think. You know, you start by spending something. You start by allocating funds and setting your, you know, your strategies, your goals, and your, you know, your expectations for the outcomes. But then you have to watch it and you have to measure it. So I'm a big fan of plan, do, check, act, you know, go through the entire feedback loop, and then evaluate and make decisions from there. I mean, it's really just that simple. So if you're not getting the result that you want, then you have to test it and question it. You know, what's missing? Am I not spending enough? Am I spending too much? Am I not targeting it right? Am I not clearly defined? You know, sometimes that happens as well. You know, make sure that your goal to start anything, you need to start with a SMART goal. It needs to be clearly defined. It needs to be, you know, realistic. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be all those things before you act, so that then you can actually look at your spend and decide whether or not it's had the intended outcome. I think that that's super important. And again, Kevin, I think you're exactly right. The spreading too thin is such a big problem. Everybody wants to be in everything. And, you know, I've heard it said before on one of these calls, you know, nobody likes a shiny new toy more than the furniture industry. It's, it's a fact. Well, guess what? You might not be able to get into the shiny new toy. You know, maybe you need to stick with the strategies you have and invest more in them so that they can actually expand further. If you've got a strategy that's working, maybe you need to put more behind it, keep an eye on it, and see if it actually works better. Because just like I think you said, Eric, you can't spend $1,000 and make $1 million. It's not going to work that way. But where is that break point that's going to make $1 million? And if you find that break point that's going to make you $1 million, will doubling the spend make you $2 million, or will it not? Where is that that place of diminishing returns? Where are you finding that place where you maximize the effectiveness? And then that's where that's what you spend on it. But then you also have to look, because is it going to continue to perform at that level? Or is there going to be a time where you need to shift, change, or replace that strategy with something else? There's always going to be a lot of that. So how's that for the jelly? Did I hit it?
It's very, very jelly.
And to her point too, a lot of retailers right now are probably spending in areas where they are overspending and have diminishing returns that they don't realize. And like too often, like people get stuck in a medium, right? Like, I love circulars, I'm going to dump all my money into circulars, and it's always worked for me. But they have no idea either how much or how little of their business is actually wrapped up in that circular. So they have to go through constantly and be auditing these things to figure out where they're spending their money, and is it actually being efficiently spent? Is it actually generating the money they think it is? Because they can save a lot by cutting out the waste, and then they can use that extra spend that they recapture towards things that they want to either test or that are going to grow the bottom line.
Carrie, something that you had mentioned was SMART goals. What are the most important traffic conversion goals that you think a retailer should be measuring?
Ooh, well, I think you start by measuring web traffic. You start by measuring, where are you now, where are you going, that type of thing. Because sometimes we have to keep our KPIs really, really simple before we start, breaking them into something more complex. So if you're going to start a campaign and your goal is to bring traffic to your website, then keep it simple, measure traffic. If you're trying to measure conversions, then you're going to need to look a little bit differently and measure your conversions. But it really depends on, and this is a point that Kevin, I think, made earlier too, it depends on what your goal is. So what's most important to measure, really, it all starts with that SMART goal. And from that SMART goal, then you're going to say, okay, what's the KPI? So if my SMART goal is to lose 15 pounds by tomorrow, then my KPI is going to be directly related to weight, right? It's the same thing with any goal that you have in your business. You have to make sure that you're staying consistent with where you started, and don't get into the weeds, because you see it all the time. Somebody creates a strategy and this is what they want to do with it, but all of a sudden that's not what you're measuring, or it's not what you're, it's not what you're using in your feedback, and you get muddled into it. Really make sure that you have defined this to start, so that you can stick with that definition through the process and see if it has delivered on that. It's really, really easy. And I see this with my students all the time too, that you just get off into this, what formula and what, all this stuff. Keep it simple. And I think that's the way to really look at it, and start with simple strategies. And then as those strategies deliver or don't deliver, you can learn and you can create strategies that make sense.
I would love to use my peanut butter jelly analogy again here, which is to say, when we think about KPIs, don't have too many of those either, right? Because what Carrie was saying is, you quickly can fall into the trap of, well, because it's measurable, I should be optimizing against like all the 15 different KPIs. That's analysis paralysis in its truest form. Please don't do that. Focus on what is the key primary KPI or two, and everything else is about how you should be thinking about your how you think about your hypotheses to run more test and learns, or as I like to say, launch and learn, because a lot of people get stuck in just having to build a test and learn that just sits in the back burner. Launch them, and learn from them. The reason why I say this is because you'll quickly see that those sub KPIs, or not primary KPIs, are probably going to have a correlation, not causation, to your end KPI, and those do matter, right? But it's all about how you use that intel to drive the primary KPI. So there's my peanut butter jelly one more time.
I'm getting hungry. I don't know if you're as hungry as I am. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, and I was just say, like, I look at things a little bit differently. Like, I think KPIs in general, and like when we're talking about like the key performance indicators, like you think about like clicks, click-through rate, impression rate, like all that sort of stuff, maybe frequency, engagement, those things, like the top line KPIs. And they're great for like the general health of a campaign. But sometimes the best performing ad is the worst clicking ad. And sometimes, like some of these things just sometimes don't add up. And so at the beginning of any campaign, you got to figure out what is your main objective. And so if my main objective is either in-store traffic or an online sale, or maybe it's in-store traffic and an actual in-store sale, right? So my main objective is an in-store sale. Then I try and figure out what are my key results that I want along the way. Like, what are the results that I need along the way of that consumer during that journey in order to get to the end objective? So the ad, that starts at the beginning is the very first place of interaction, but then along the way, you can judge all these things out. And so ultimately, in the end, if I'm a retailer and I want to run a brick and mortar business, my main objective is register rings, ups in the store and register rings. And so I should be optimizing everything that I do along the way towards that. And so if you start thinking about things from like, okay, I look at KPIs for health of my campaign, understanding audience penetration, things like that, but looking at key results as to what I need in order to end up getting the objective, which is the sale.
How do you track that? So if I'm spending money digitally and doing online advertising, how am I tracking in-store sales and correlating those two numbers?
It depends on the system. Like in our system, for example, we do matchbacks back from sales data in store all the way to the online ad. So that gives us great visibility into the actual register ring and which audience, which person, all that is actually converting and why. And then we use that to optimize off of. Google has the ability to kind of like match up and do in-store sales as well. But they do it a little bit off of a combination of both the data that you load in and then the people that have been seen using geolocation services. And so that one can get a little bit wonky, but it's still better than nothing, right? So you just got to be looking at what are the different measurement tools available for the different platforms. And in advertising and marketing, it's always test, retest, and test again, and you don't want to go too broad with the audience that you're going after. If you're in a smaller market, or even if you're in like Miami for that matter, right? Like I would break the market up, and put it into these smaller buckets so that way I have data that I can actually deal with and understand. If I'm trying to deal with too big of an audience with too small of a budget, I'm never going to get data back that I can actually learn anything from. And so you need to be testing in the sense that I'm just trying to get data out, right? There are like when you do online e-commerce sales for new products and things, a lot of people will start off and you might test like a couple $100 in a day just to see like if you can get an ad that clicks. Then you find an ad that clicks and then you try and find an ad that sells, right? And like so you kind of like build your funnel along the way. You can do the same thing for brick and mortar. You just have to be willing to test it and see what's working and what's not.
Carrie, what about you? How are you at Bears? Are you guys taking a similar approach to what Eric's describing, or how are you looking at how we spend money digitally to drive in-store sales and tracking that?
So, and I agree with Eric. There's several different mechanisms out there. Some are based on matchback. Some are based on, device habits that, Google's reading at a high level, those types of things. Everything's got to be taken with a certain grain of salt, I mean, and not everything is as black and white as you think it's going to be, but it's giving you ideas. So a campaign, Google might be telling me that this strategy brought me 40 footsteps, let's say. I can't categorically state that it was 40 footsteps that came through from that. But if they tell me another campaign brought me 100, what I do know is that 100 is bigger than 40. So I know that one of them, if that was my goal, that one that ranked at 100 is a better result than the 40. But I don't know that either of those numbers actually is a fully valid number. I would certainly never stake my reputation on that. However, it gives you an idea. It can give you trends, which I think is really what's most important, because there's still a lot that's in the wind. But it's not any different than it's always been in advertising. I mean, there's that old saying, 50% of my advertising works. I just don't know which 50%. But there is still a bit of that even with digital. Just because it's digital doesn't mean everything is 100% trackable. It's just not.
Help me circle this out. So if I'm a smaller retailer and I know that 95% of my sales are coming from in-store sales, and in order to really get that first page ranking and guarantee it, I have to pay. How do I compete with a larger organization to get local traffic into my brick and mortar store?
What do you want to start with? So if we're talking Google search, just in general, because I think like whenever I think about competitiveness, I'm always reminded of Rooms to Go. So Rooms to Go, if you know their marketing strategy is go into a market and buy everything, right? Without any care as to whether or not it actually converts or not, or, has diminishing returns. They just want to buy it all, right? So it's very hard to compete with somebody who wants to buy it all because you'll never spend as much as they're going to spend. Google search, in my opinion, is one of those places where you can get really creative, and Google does a lot of the work for you in telling you who you need to go after, right? Like you can do simple things like search for, furniture stores near me, and then scroll down to the bottom of Google and I'll tell you what the other related search terms are, right? So if I know that these are the top things being searched for in my market, I can go out and buy paid search ads against those terms. And I can try and capture some of that traffic. And then what I'm looking for is to make myself a more relevant response than the next one competitor. And so you might not be able to outspend a big national retailer, but you can usually tailor your ads more than they can because they're usually using a national media buying company to do all their media buying for them. And so they're not going into Fort Myers, Florida and running one singular ad group in Fort Myers. They're buying, a whole region, a whole state, maybe the entire nation off the same campaign. And so very often you can find that there's gaps in the ad response that they're putting up. So it might not be exactly relevant. Like if I can put the name of the city that I'm in the ad and the person is searching for in that city, I'm going to look more relevant than the ad that is, just blanketly, furniture for sale, right? So you can do these little things to make your ad more relevant. So that way Google might give you a little bit of extra help and bump you higher without you having to go out and spend as much as they are. And then the other thing is that you can go in there and you can try and find the little groups of keywords which are less competitive. And so maybe there's less traffic on it, but it might be a little bit more overlooked. And then it gives you the opportunity to take your smaller budget, take it further, and actually gain some traffic response from it.
You mentioned, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. I think those are all accurate, right? You're gonna probably be more nimble as a smaller retailer than the big nationals, right? And who use those national buying agencies. You'll probably be a little bit more nimble because you can specifically talk about your one location or several, locations that are nearby, and you're gonna probably capitalize on some of those niche keywords. The other thing I'd say is, it also serves to you as an opportunity, right? Because you're probably going to capture all of those. And if you are winning and you're generating revenue from it, you'll now be able to eventually expand. And I mean, I don't know that you'll ever get to massive budgets, but you'll expand those budgets to even be more competitive. So what makes you, what is your seemingly like almost like a disadvantage is actually a big advantage in the long haul, right? So things like, insert retailer near me, those are techniques that I would certainly deploy. And one other pro tip that I'd say is if you haven't looked at your account structure in the last like 2 or 3 years, or if that's not a habit that you're currently doing, I would do that. Purely because of some of the things that Carrie talked at the top, right? Like these algorithms and the way in which Google and Bing and everyone else deploys their crawlers, it also means your account structure should be optimized or at least refreshed every few years to make sure that it's being adaptive enough for our big engines to help crawl and bring you the right kind of right traffic and optimizations as it relates to some of the best practices that they bring forward.
Is that a peanut butter sandwich, Mark?
I can't explain it. I had this sudden urge for peanut butter and jelly, and it was insatiable. I'm sorry, I don't mean to eat in front of you. I'm sorry, but wow.
Mark, if you keep up this behavior, you're not going to be able to work here as of next week.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I love a good metaphor like the next guy, and I just think I just love it when you get one, you just run with it. But I also feel bad to kind of step in at this point because my goodness, this has been absolutely wonderful. I mean, I think there's so much usable information here and always, great takeaways, which is what we love about these webinars. So first and foremost, Shannon, awesome job kind of, getting this all together. And I just want to make sure that we thank Kevin Hung from Synchrony. Kevin, awesome to have you on board. We hope to have you again for another webinar. Eric
Absolutely.
Brindley from Esquire Advertising. Always appreciate you, and Carrie Fletcher from Bears. Once again, absolutely terrific today. Thank you for spending all the time. And we just always at the very end of this want to wish two things to everybody who's watching either live or when they watch it on demand. And that is, we want to make sure that you enjoy good health and great sales. On behalf of everybody here at HFA, thank you so much. And if you're looking for a dietary suggestion, peanut butter and jelly. We'll see you next time.
Thank
Peanut
you.
butter jelly. Bye, everybody.
Mhm.